Surya, Mr. Vikram Sampath, Srimati Madhu Nataraj. May I please request you to come and take your seats so that we can start the event. The launch of Dr. Vikram Sampath's much anticipated 10th book, Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore's Interregnum, 1760 to 1799. This evening is brought to you jointly by the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR, and the Prabha Khaitan Foundation. Dr. Sampath, of course, needs no introduction. His books, ranging from Splendors of Royal Mysore to 2 hefty volumes on Savarkar, have made significant contributions to our understanding of Bharat's culture and historical legacy. As many of you may know, his book, Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyanvapi, came out in March earlier this year. And less than 9 months later, here we are with his humongous book running into 900 pages, 3 lakh words, and all I can, along with all of you, wonder is how do you do it, Dr. Vikram Sampath? Adding to his list of accomplishments, this year is the establishment of the Foundation for Historical and Cultural Research, FIHCR, and it gives me great pleasure to introduce this wonderful organization, which is also the co-host for today's event. FIHCR is dedicated to the preservation and celebration of Bharat's rich historical heritage. Built on the pillars of research and scholarship, education and interactive learning, and cultural preservation, it aspires to bring Dr. Sampath's vision to bridge academic research with public awareness, fostering a sense of pride in Bharat's identity. Within just a month of its launch, FIHCR announced the Sir Jadunath Sarkar Fellowship, supports fresh perspectives and nuanced scholarship. This August, 8 scholars from diverse fields were selected to research and write a publishable manuscript on Indian history ranging from the ancient to post-independence periods, each receiving a grant of 15 lakhs. In addition, FIHCR is already at work on its first annual thematic research project, History of Buddhism in Bharat, in collaboration with the prestigious Nalanda University. But that's not all. History is not just long and dense research papers that we all pretend to understand. History is fascinating, enchanting, and fun. That's the motto of its Yuva branch, which creates compelling content for younger audiences, proving that history isn't just academic text. It's full of stories that are interesting and fun. Just last month, FIHCR Yuva launched the Shri Aurobindo History Essay Competition, targeting high school students and aimed at creating an interest in history that goes beyond the classroom. On the cultural preservation front, FIHCR houses the Indian Archive of Music, founded by Dr. Sampath, which is the country's first free digital archive of vintage gramophone recordings. A treasure trove of timeless sounds. FIHCR also plans to leverage AI and related technology across our verticals. Whether it's analyzing historical texts, creating interactive learning experiences, or preserving our archives, technology can be a powerful ally in making history relevant and engaging for today's generation. With that being said, I now invite Poonam Bafna from PKF to the stage to welcome everyone. Poonam Bafna, Ehsaas Woman of Coimbatore. Ladies and gentlemen, please give her a round of applause.
Thank you, Ms. Shubhi Mehta, for the warm welcome. Good evening, everyone. I am Poonam Bafna, Ehsaas Woman of Coimbatore, welcomes you all to an enchanting book unveiling event. Kitaab, a book launch genus of the Prabha Khaitan Foundation in association with the Federation of Indian Historical and Cultural Research, today brings together a well-curated event here at Prestige Falcon Towers to celebrate Vikram Sampath's latest literary contribution. Meticulously researched, authoritative, and unputdownable, Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore's Interregnum, opens a window to the life and times of one of the most debated figures from India's history. Before we commence with all the grandeur of things we have lined up for you for this evening, allow me to introduce Prabha Khaitan Foundation and its varied works. Prabha Khaitan Foundation, a Kolkata-based non-profit organization, creates the finest literary and cultural experiences on the global map. The foundation was established by an eminent Indian literature, entrepreneur, philanthropist, social activist, and feminist, late Dr. Prabha Khaitan, back in the 1980s. With the envision of late Dr. Prabha Khaitan and her golden philosophy, Karma Hi Jeevan Hai, the foundation strives relentlessly to create cultural capital through activities and endeavors that propagates literary and cultural assets of India. In the past 4 decades, the foundation grew in stature and recognition as an organization that gives the best platform to writing geniuses and showcases the kaleidoscopic cultural heritage of India. The foundation has several boutique literary initiatives under its wing: an author's afternoon, the Right Circle, Kalam, Akar, etc. Of the literary initiatives, Kitaab occupies a unique significance to us, marking the emergence of a book and offering authors a stage to present their latest literary works to an insightful and discerning audience. The anthem of Prabha Khaitan Foundation deserves a special mention. It is ensured by the national philosophy, unity in diversity. The anthem of Prabha Khaitan Foundation has been curated by musical genius Pandit Vishwamohan Bhattji. The anthem reflects the true essence of the multicultural diversity of India. It's now my privilege to introduce today's guest of honor, Shri Tejasvi Surya ji. Shri Tejasvi Surya has been serving as a Member of Parliament from the Bangalore South constituency since May 2019. Elected to the 17th Lok Sabha at the age of just 28, he is also the National President of the Bharatiya Janata Party's youth wing. Bharatiya Janata Yuva Morcha since September 2020. A lawyer by training and profession, Surya has a deep interest in history, philosophy, science, and civilizational studies. Tejasvi Surya ji represents a constituency where masala dosa goes along with machine language learning, and filter coffee and filter array JavaScripts exist side by side. He has harnessed technology to make government's relief schemes and systems more transparent and accessible to people, and advocated key mass public transit projects in the city, including the expansion of the Bangalore Metro network and the Bengaluru Suburban Railway project. Beyond his political and professional responsibilities, Surya ji is an active triathlete and fitness enthusiast. He has participated in various fitness competitions. The most recent being the Ironman 70.3. A very warm welcome to you, Shri Tejasvi Surya ji. In conversation with the author, Dr. Vikram Sampath, we have today a renowned artist and educator, Madhu Nataraj ji. Award-winning choreographer, art entrepreneur, and educator, Madhu Nataraj ji dons many hats with grace and dynamism. She has over 450 choreographies to her credit, has performed and given talks and designed events in over 40 countries. It calls for a round of applause. She's trained in Kathak under the tutelage of her mother, the legendary Guru, Dr. Maya Rao, and Guru Chitra Venugopal. She heads the globally acclaimed STEM dance company, and India's premier dance education center, the Natya Institute of Kathak and Choreography. Madhu was awarded the Bismillah Khan Yuva Puraskar by the Government of India. Karnataka Kalashri by the Government of Karnataka. The Sticky Women Achievers Award, and India Today chose her as one of India's 50 young achievers. Madhu is an Aspen Global Leadership Network Fellow. A very warm welcome to you, Madhuji. Looking forward to the session with you. Now, for the star author for the evening, Dr. Vikram Sampath. Bangalore-based historian, Dr. Vikram Sampath is the author of 10 acclaimed books on Indian history. His 2-volume biography of Veer Savarkar and his latest books, Brave Hearts of Bharat and Waiting for Shiva, Unearthing the Truth of Kashi's Gyan Vapi, has gone on to become national bestsellers. His latest book, Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore's Interregnum, 1760 to 1799, which is being launched today, has been creating waves even before its launch and went on for 2 reprints even before the book officially hit the stand. In 2021, Vikram was elected a Fellow of the prestigious Royal Historical Society. He was awarded the Sahitya Akademi First Yuva Puraskar in English Literature and the ARSC International Award for Excellence in Historical Research in New York for his book, My Name is Gauhar Jaan, The Life and Times of a Musician. The book has even been adapted for a play, Gauhar, by Lilith Dubey. He was among 4 writers and the artists selected as writers in residence at the Rashtrapati Bhavan in 2015. Vikram has a doctorate in history and music from the University of Queensland, Australia, and was a senior research fellow at the Nehru Memorial Museum and Library, New Delhi. He was also a fellow of the Aspen Global Leadership Network, Eisenhower Global Fellow, and a visiting fellow at the Wissenschaft College, Berlin. Currently, he is an adjunct senior fellow at Monash University, Australia. He is the founder of the Archive of Indian Music and the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research that fosters new scholarships in Indian history. Can we have a round of applause? Heartiest welcome to you, Dr. Sampath. I now invite and request the 3 luminaries to come and grace the stage. I now invite and request Anindita Chatterjee, Executive Trustee of Prabha Khaitan Foundation, to felicitate dignitaries, Shri Tejasvi Surya, Thank you, Ms. Chatterjee. I now invite Anuradha Srinivasan from the Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research to felicitate the dignitaries. Thank you, Ms. Srinivasan. May I now request Ms. Shubhi Mehta on the dais to take over the proceedings further.
Thank you, Poonam. Ladies and gentlemen, it's that time of the evening. May I please request Shri Tejasvi to unveil the book, and may I please request Anindita Chatterjee, Anil Kadhodia, Poonam Bafna, Ehsaas Woman of Coimbatore, Revathi Raju, Ehsaas Woman of Bengaluru, Mr. Bhavish Agarwal, founder Ola, Rajalakshmi Agarwal, chairperson Ola Foundation, and Devesh Verma, CEO Ola Foundation, to please join us on the stage for the same. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Vikram Sampath once anticipated textbook Tipu Sultan, the Saga of Mysore Interregnum, 1760 to 1799. May I please request the guests to kindly take their places in the front row? Opening comments and say a few words on our lovely book launch.
ಎಲ್ರಿಗೂ ನಮಸ್ಕಾರ. ನನಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಸಂತೋಷ ಏನು ಅಂದರೆ ಇವತ್ತು ದೇಶದಾದ್ಯಂತ ಇತಿಹಾಸ ತಜ್ಞರಾಗಿ ಮನೆ ಮಾತಾಗಿರುವಂಥ ವಿಕ್ರಮ್ ಸಂಪತ್ ನಮ್ಮ ಬೆಂಗಳೂರಿನ ಹುಡುಗ, ನಮ್ಮ ಕನ್ನಡದ ಹುಡುಗ, ಅದು ನಮಗೆ ಬಹಳ ಹೆಮ್ಮೆ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. This evening when my father saw me with this book in hand, he remarked jocularly that this Tipu Sultan guy is keeping you all very busy. In fact, there have been multiple occasions, including forums in the Bangalore Literary Festival, newspaper, op-ed spaces, television debates, where Tipu Sultan has brought Vikram and me together. And today again, the interest that we have in Tipu Sultan has brought all of us together. And at least in that sense, he is not altogether a divisive force, because at least so many of us have come together to debate and discuss about him. At the very outset, there are two things on which I want all of us to acknowledge our deep gratitude and appreciation for Vikram Sampath. Most of you here are men and women of letters. You know how difficult it is to even write a small blog post. And in today's social media intense times, even a 280 character tweet, drafting a 280 character tweet itself is a big challenge. Our attention spans are so low, and for some reason, as a society, as a generation, at least I would say, speaking for people of my age, we have resorted to instant gratification even when it comes to knowledge enhancement. So most of our opinion making, most of our understanding of even nuanced subjects is unfortunately reduced to Instagram memes. And it is in such a social context that Vikram Sampath has come out with a 1,000-page definitive research historical book. And I was going through this book the last week or so, and at various instances, one aspect of the book and the author comes out characteristically. Well, there have been historians who have been loyal to ideologies. There have been historians who have been loyal to political parties. There have been historians who have been loyal to their faiths and their belief systems. But there are only but a handful of historians the country has seen whose allegiance has started with and has ended with truth and truth alone. And Vikram Sampath stands shining in that very few groups of people. In the very first, in the penultimate paragraph of the prologue, Vikram encapsulates this spirit that has governed not just this work, but all the 9 other works that Vikram Sampath has written and which the society has so well received. I would want to read these few lines for all of you. The author says, after all, in the Indic imagination, Itihasa, the Sanskrit word for history, translates literally to "it thus happened." Glossing over his cruelties and barbaric deeds, only to sound politically correct, or labor under a sad misapprehension that whitewashing these crimes would somehow magically maintain social cohesion and national unity, is being extremely treacherous and intellectually dishonest. At the same time, erasing some redeeming features of his character and life is also being disingenuous with history. Then he says, at the end of the day, a historian's real shield is his or her faithful adherence to facts and facts alone. It is for this reason that this definitive work on Tipu Sultan and the 40 years of history of the Mysore kingdom at that point of time will hold a special place in the archives of human history when we go back to understand how human beings at that period of time in this particular geography, how they dealt with things. So in one sentence, this book is the definitive account on the life and times of Tipu Sultan. The second reason why we must also be grateful to Vikram is because in addition to writing himself, he has also founded the Foundation for Historical and Cultural Research in India, the FIHCR. One of the strong points of this civilization, this culture, has been the unbroken lineage of the Guru Shishya Parampara that has kept this civilization so strong and intact. And what Vikram and his team and the foundation envisions to do through this foundation is to groom and make ready scholars, especially in history and social sciences, for the coming generation of India. And I think that is a monumental contribution to the country in its own right. Because we need people who will tell our stories in an unadulterated fashion and tell the story with courage, with conviction, and with fearlessness for years to come. I think both of these extraordinary work that Vikram Sampath and his team are doing, as a grateful society, as a grateful generation, Vikram, we are so deeply appreciative of this work. We have a very interesting panel discussion to follow. I would not want to take much of the time. But this book, one may naturally wonder what is the relevance of discussing the details of Tipu Sultan in today's India. And most of the people in the audience is young, and naturally this question becomes even more profound for people who are young. So why should we be discussing what happened 25 years ago? Friends, the reason why this book and the ideas that are discussed here hold such significant relevance and impact in today's real polity, in today's real society, is because the ideas that inspired Tipu Sultan to do what he did then is still inspiring a section of people to do what they are doing today. Like all of you are aware, I am part of the Joint Parliamentary Committee that is dealing with the amendments to the Waqf Act. In Hyderabad, when the JPC was on a study tour, a farmers' delegation met with us, and the opening sentence of that delegation submission was that Aurangzeb may have left us around 400 years ago, but the ghost of Aurangzeb is still encroaching our lands. This was the opening line of the farmers' delegation that came before us. And this is not just with respect to the encroachment of the Waqf, but it holds true even in our public debates, our public discourse when it comes to issues as important as equality of treatment before the law, ideas of secularism, ideas of how history must be written, how our festivals must be celebrated, how our temples must be treated vis-a-vis government. So the ideas discussed here are not just for the consumption of the historian or those who are interested in history, but it is all the more relevant and important for common people like us, because the ideas here have a real impact in the choices that we are making and the choices that we will make tomorrow. I would want to take your attention to a couple of paragraphs from this book, which gives a very profound insight as to why this is important. In the chapter titled The Affairs of the State, the author here quotes from one Mr. Bowring, and the paragraph goes like this. Drawing a rather harsh assessment of his legacy, his here is Tipu's legacy, that was marred by bigotry and despotism, Bowring states, Tipu rivaled Muhammad of Ghazni, Nadir Shah, and Alauddin the Pathan, Emperor of Delhi, surnamed the Khuni or the Bloody, all of whom were famous for the number of infidels slaughtered by their orders. For this very zeal of the faith, this is very important, this paragraph. For this very zeal of the faith, notwithstanding the cruelties which attended his persecutions, the name of Tipu Sultan was long held in reverence by his co-religionists in southern India. A proof how readily crimes that cry to heaven are condoned when the perpetrator of them is supposed to have been animated by a sincere desire to propagate the faith which he professed. such profound lines. So the motivation for the barbarity, the bigotry, the despotism of Tipu Sultan is condoned by the people who are his apologists, because the motivation for what he did was the religion. And until, as a civil society, as an intelligent society, as a society that demands reforms, if we do not push for intellectual, social and historical reforms on this aspect, the ghost of either Tipu or the ghost of Aurangzeb will keep continuing haunting all of us. It is in that context that reading, rereading, visiting and revisiting these historical episodes is extremely crucial for a society like ours. Vikram also quotes in the very foreword that is written by Dr. S.L. Bhairappa. Dr. Bhairappa mentions how when he was the member of the ICHR, he was confronted with this question of what is the object of history? Is the object of history to create national integration by whitewashing historical crimes? Or is the object of history only to present before the audience or the reader the plain historical fact? And have a belief that the human being reading it will make an independent assessment using his discretion and take independent choices. Unfortunately, for a very long time, because of the power of the state and because of the power of the governments, the pursuit of history, both study as well as its narration, was reduced to a political project and not an academic project. And it's only in the last 10 years, thanks to the government and most importantly, thanks to the society at large that has created the necessary ecosystem, that people like Vikram Sampath have come forward and have been writing and making an effort to present history with allegiance only to fact and truth. This, as a society, we must develop and must. I would want to leave all of you with just one thought. That while we are here on the point of revisiting and correcting the mistakes of history and how history is told, I think it is also incumbent on all of us to be extremely vigilant on the excesses of the present as well. Because the historical or cultural or intellectual immersion that we get through works of this kind must prepare us to address the challenges of today. Otherwise, this will be purely an academic pursuit, which historians and students of history may delve in, but as political leaders, as common people of the society, we are dealing with the real world practical issues of today. Therefore, what we do here must have a relevance of today. Let me take a minute to explain to you how whitewashing of crimes by a certain particular group of people is whitewashed not just in history, but even in the present. Couple of days ago, the chairman of the JPC, on my invitation, visited a couple of districts in Karnataka. All of you have been following the news in the papers and the television. In Haveri, in Hubli, a delegation of farmers from Haveri met with us. And they submitted a memorandum. One of the farmer's son had committed suicide because his land, 4 acres of land that stood in his name, was unilaterally and without following any procedure of the law, unilaterally it was changed in the name of the Waqf Board. And the moment the mutation register and the RTCs were changed, this farmer could not get access to loans, could not get access to subsidies, and his land practically was rendered dead. And he was literally pushed to suicide. His father, his mother came, gave a representation, media covered it, and then I tweeted about it. The minister tweets that this is fake news. A couple of minutes later, the police department's official handle of that particular district says this is fake news because the farmer had committed suicide for some other personal reason and not because of the Waqf encroachment. And then an FIR is filed not just on me but also on the media organizations that filed this report. And the following day there are big newspaper headlines that an FIR is filed on so and so on these media organizations for fake news. So their credibility is questioned. All along, while this entire drama has unfolded, both the mother and the father of this deceased farmer have given not less than 20 interviews to all media channels, continuously saying that their son died because of this particular reason. But the entire state machinery is on the other hand trying to falsify the claims of the parents. So you don't have to go 225 years back in history to understand the motivations and the SOPs of why these people wanted to whitewash the crimes of history. The same SOP, the same motivation, the same agenda is in play even today. And coming back to the statement the farmers made in Hyderabad, that Aurangzeb may have left the physical world 400 years ago, but his ghost is still encroaching our lands. It's so true. You are seeing today that even the school where Sir M. Vishweshwaraya studied is being claimed as Waqf property. Bidar airport is claimed as Waqf property. Our Vidhan Sauda is being claimed as Waqf property. Deep forest lands in Uttar Kannada, where there has been no human habitation at all, they are being claimed as Waqf property. Temples, Kalyanis and Pushkaranis that are 1400, 1500 years old, 100 years even before the founding of Islam, are being claimed as Waqf property. And what may seem on the face of it to be jocular is a very serious matter, because this kind of unilateral, unbridled powers were given to the Waqf board by the statute itself. In 1995 and in 2013, amendments were carried out to the Act in effect to give this body powers to be the petitioner, the judge and the executioner, all in the same capacity. It has the power to decide any property that it has reason to believe to be Waqf property. Issue a list, get the government to issue a gazette notification. If you have a problem with that, you have to come before its own tribunal. And the decision of that tribunal is final, you can't go in appeal. So the invasion that started by the likes of Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan did not end with their physical disappearance. The encroachment and invasions that took place then have now gotten statutory sanctity. And it is in all of these developments and context that efforts of this kind to educate the masses, educate the public on how we must be dealing with these important questions of polity, of society, of yesterday and today and tomorrow has supreme significance. And it is here that Vikram Sampath's extremely well-researched and remarkably written, because one of the banes of very well-researched historical books is that they are not engaging to the reader as a literary piece of work. You know, for all of us who struggle to sleep at night, they sometimes are a great aid of, a tool to help us, get to bed early. But Vikram, I must tell you, I have been reading this book the last week, and a 1,000-page historical novel which has anecdotes, which has, footnotes almost for every sentence. Such well-researched book is remarkably engaging in the style of the writing. It is unput down. So, thank you so much, Dr. Vikram Sampath. On behalf of a grateful society, on behalf of, most importantly, our generation. Because I think it is my generation, it is our generation that is in many ways at the crossroads of a lot of these existential questions and cultural changes that are taking place. I think in that context, this is an extremely important work. And in about 14 years now, I think you have written 10 wonderful books that have been so well received. I am very sure that for our generation, you will be remembered in the same respect, in the same adoration that we hold the likes of an R.C. Mazumdar. Thank you so much. All the very best. Bharat Mata Ki Jai.
Thank you very much, Shri Tejasvi Surya, for very consciously and creatively bridging the relevance of visiting and revisiting our past and making sure that we do keep it in our consciousness in the present as well. Ladies and gentlemen, it's time for us to be in conversation for the man of the evening, Dr. Vikram Sampath, and may I please request you to come up on stage, and may I also request Ms. Madhu Nataraj to come on stage and be in conversation for the next session. I think we deserve a better round of applause, ladies and gentlemen.
Namaskar, and a very warm welcome to all of you as we come back to talk about an assiduously, very well researched, definitive book on the life and times and impact of one of history's most controversial personages, Tipu Sultan. But before I start, I'd like to ask you, Vikram, because being a dancer, we have these green room rights before a premiere. And tonight is the first in-person book launch happening. How do you feel, Vikram? What goes on behind this calm facade of Dr. Vikram Sampath?
Namaskara. Very good evening to everyone. Yes, I am, as we discussed backstage, very nervous about how this evening is going to proceed. And probably this is the first time I've been so, actually nervous about a book which I have written, largely because of the topic and the various emotions that it evokes among people. But Madhu, and it's such a great pleasure and an honor to be on stage with a very, very dear friend. Our friendship goes back to more than a decade, and our mothers were friends and all of that. So today my heart, you asked what's going on in my mind, I think my heart swells with gratitude, immense gratitude, and it's almost like life coming full circle. I hope there's another circle going around too, because my literary journey began with Tipu Sultan. I mean, I must thank him in that way at least, and of course Sanjay Khan. and I'll explain more as we move along. But since then, as Mr. Tejasvi Surya mentioned, I thought it was a one-book wonder which I would write and get back to a very boring corporate job that I had. Daily, cursing myself whether I'm going to die one day, calculating profit and loss of some American firm. But yeah, thankfully destiny had other plans in mind. So, and through this journey of the last 16, 17 years, I think I wouldn't have been able to achieve this but for my parents. The amount of sacrifices that they made to bring me to where I am today, and my mother is up there somewhere blessing me, but my father is here, and I'd really like to acknowledge his presence. I'm very, very grateful to so many people I see in the audience. My very dear friend Bhavish Agarwal and Rajalakshmi here. The FIHCR has been possible only and only because of the support that Bhavish, Raj and Devesh have provided. So it's really wonderful that corporate India's heart also beats for culture, for history and heritage. And our young, dynamic Member of Parliament who, facing all the controversies that even rock today's newspaper headlines, we were really unsure whether you would be able to make it this evening. But you are always someone who is known to take the bull by its horns, and today you're here, you did that yet again. So thank you so much, Tejasvi, for your love, your support. It really means a lot. I'm deeply grateful to the Prabha Khaitan Foundation and Anindita and the entire group for always being a pillar of strength. Some friends, Shravan, there's so many other friends, some who don't want to be named, some who want to be named. I won't get into that long list. So I did the vote of thanks before we actually start the program.
So you're feeling nervous?
Very much. All the 9 rasas.
Shall we ask him to demonstrate all the 9 rasas? Yes?
That's your forte.
Vikram, in your very prolific work trajectory, you have resurrected fallen heroes, forgotten personalities, even a dynasty which out of Karnataka people don't know much about. And here you choose a very exalted personage, and I think let's get it out of the way. The question that's in everybody's mind, why Tipu Sultan?
I'm sure my parents are asking the same question in some other context. So as I said, I think my foray into writing, into historiography was thanks to Tipu. I was a boy of 12 or 13 years of age when I'm sure a lot of you, the older ones in the audience, must have seen The Sword of Tipu Sultan by Sanjay Khan. And in that, if you remember, just to highlight Tipu and his father Hyder, who were actually the usurpers of the throne of Mysore, the Wadiyar royal family was shown in a very, very poor light. The Immadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar, the Maharaja, was shown like this, obese retard who was dancing along with the court dancer. And the Maharani, the very sagacious Rajalakshmi Ammani, she was shown as one of those typical, Ekta Kapoor serial vamps who's all the time conspiring and conniving and all of that. And I think the apple cart was upset in large parts of southern Karnataka, which was part of the old Mysore state, where even to this day, the Wadiyar family is held in a lot of regard and reverence for the outstanding work that at least the later Wadiyars, Nalgadi Krishnaraj Wadiyar and others, laid the foundations of modern Karnataka. And the studio had also caught fire, and Sanjay Khan's face had got burned, and a lot of Kannada newspapers had these stories that it's the curse of the Wadiyar, and that's why this had happened. Now, as a young boy, my history teacher is here, Jai Shri Ravindraji. She luckily came much later, but when this serial was going on, I had some other history teacher who would give me the maximum punishments in school. If I received maximum punishments for any subject, it was for history. Always found kneeling down outside class. So for a boy like that who literally hated history and the rote learning that we were subjected to, this serial and all these episodes that were going on, I don't know what it stirred in my mind. We have nothing to do with Mysore. Our family comes from different other parts. My father is a Tamilian, my mother was a Maharashtrian. But still, this Mysore bug, I think sometimes destiny just chooses you for something. And over the next 10 years, it was relentless pursuit of just the truth about initially only that Maharaja and his wife. But later it expanded to the entire dynasty of the Vadiyars, who ruled for 600 long years, one of the longest reigning royal houses of India. And I also realized that there was not a single book written on them in a modern context by anybody. So that's how almost serendipitously this sort of the Splendors of Royal Mysore, I forgot my own book's name, came out in 2008. And during a lot of lectures that were happening that time, I remember in the Bangalore International Center, once there was a lecture on the Interregnum period, which is the subtitle of the book. Interregnum is an interval or an intermission where a normal government is deposed and you have a usurpation. And I was just quoting, letters of Tipu, the ones he wrote to his own commanders, go to Calicut and convert so many, kill so many. There's no ambiguity, it's right there as his own work. And suddenly a very civilized audience like this, they broke out into a lot of protests. Paper rockets were thrown at the stage. Rocket technology after all.
And not rocket science, right?
You have the last word here. So, and the program was, aborted in the middle. I was ushered to the green room. And like today, my poor father was sitting right in the front row, and I remember someone coming, some person, I think some Tipu fan club or someone, came and thrust one pamphlet in his hand and said, you have an only son, and if you want him to live long, please ask him to mind what he speaks. And obviously, that night, there was drama at home. My mother, who didn't keep too good health, a few weeks later, when I had written some article on the divans of Mysore, starting with Purnaya, and there was some reference to Tipu in that. That caused a huge furor, and right here, MG Road, my effigy was burnt and so on. And that time my mother really extracted a promise out of me that in public you're never going to speak about this man. And I kept that promise to her till the time she was alive. And after that I thought, now the promise is void, but with the hope that from whichever heaven she is in, I think she'll be protecting me against any unintended consequences of this book. But I think even while I wrote that book, Madhu, those 40 years, I think they were definitive in not only the history of this state, but the history of India. Because Mysore was the last bastion of resistance. And after that, our capitulation to British colonialism was such an easy task. I wanted to zero in and zoom into that particular era a lot more. And so, the last 4 or 5 years, I've been revisiting this topic, from all the sources that I was already, a little aware of, but looking at it with a fresh perspective. And particularly, with all due apologies to Tejasvi, the way politicians, intrude into matters of history and muddy the waters on all sides, to be honest. I mean, while Congress goes to one extreme of having the Tipu Jayanti and commemorating this, section 144 has to be imposed, and this birthday celebration has to be held where 2 people are killed in police firing just because you want to celebrate someone's birth anniversary. Then communities of today have that intergenerational trauma and memory, all of that on one side. But even in the run to the Karnataka elections, Tejasvi's party too had this Uri Gowda, Nanje Gowda thing that was going on, which was a figment of absurdity, because nowhere in any Mysorean records is the mention of these 2 Gowda chieftains. I mean, if you want Vocaliga vote, you have to do something else. You don't have to create. I hope you keep coming to my future book launch. So, when all of this happens, I think it is the historian's burden, or should I say responsibility, that you bring facts to the table. That people of the past, just like people of today, cannot be boxed into watertight compartments of black and white. There are a lot of nuances, there are a lot of shades of grey. And as he mentioned, 200 pages of the book are footnotes and bibliography. So for every claim I make, there is a back source, there is a reference. So the record is set straight. I'm sure everyone is going to cherry pick and use things to their advantage. But then I thought it was necessary that all of this comes together. And a very famous historian had once said that every account of history is but an interim report. There is nothing final about history. And every generation visits, revisits, as he said, revisits the same story, and looking back from their own experience, tries to reinterpret the past. So a long answer to your why Tipu Sultan question. I hope that answers it forever.
No, and I must say also, when you read the book, and I'm sure most of you have already done that, is that, you look at so many realities, social, geopolitical, and really it's a book where historical veracity meets beautiful storytelling. Vikram, I wanted to ask you, over 1/3 of this book is dedicated to Hyder Ali. And you often said that Hyder is a perfect foil for Tipu, and he got an empire almost from him on a platter. Is it because there is no context to Tipu unless you have Hyder? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. In fact, I wanted the first volume to be only on Hyder because about 1 lakh words of 3 lakh is on him. He's a fascinating character. Honestly, it's a study in human psychology, leadership skills, strategy, all of it. Where, this little boy who's about 4 years old, his father is in the service of the Nawab of Sira, and his father is killed in battle. In fact, the astrologers, we have a very eminent astrologer, Pandit Narhari ji here, Katti Narhari. So the astrologers of the time, they actually predicted when they saw Hyder's horoscope when he was born, that he would actually usher the death of his father, Fateh Muhammad. And he should actually poison the child with, the poison milk. But he refuses, and the prediction comes in a perverse way true. When he's just 4 years, his father is killed in battle. He owed a lot of money to someone, Abbas Quli Khan, and to get that money back, Hyder, who's 4 years old, and Shehbaz, his elder brother, who's 8 years old, they are put into a hollow of a kettle drum and nagada and beaten on it. So the kind of tortures that these 4 and 8-year-old boys go through. And while that is happening, his mother, Majida Begum, somehow manages to escape and comes to the Maharaja of Mysore, pleading for mercy, saying, please do something, give us the money that we could pay the debt off. So in such a pitiable condition, it was the Mysore Maharaja who took mercy on this lady, gives money to the debtors, and promises her that once they come of age, we will employ them into our army service. And he enters the portrait of Mysore and its history in 1749 with the siege of Devanhalli, just here. And from then, in just 12 years, this man running with the hare, hunting with the hounds, Machiavellian, probably putting most of our wily politicians of today to shame, manages to make alliances, dumps his mentor when it is convenient to him, befriends someone with whom it's like a totally unlikely partner, and in 12 years he manages to usurp and take over the throne of his own benefactor. That speaks something about his caprice and his strategy and statecraft. So in 1761, when he usurps the throne of Mysore from the Wadiyar, but he is very, very, conscious of the fact that this is a Hindu ruler who's much respected by a Hindu majority population. So he adopts a very interesting kind of setup where the Wadiyar is kept as a puppet on the throne. All the trophies of war are gone and submitted to his feet. All the farmans come out in the Wadiyar's name, but everybody knew where the power actually lay. And while the Maharaja, while he was growing up, the new Maharaja who comes in, the minute he starts to assume a mind of his own, or he starts to flex his muscle, overnight poisoned milk is sent to his chambers, and the next day he's dead, and then an infant is placed on the throne. So a puppet ruler kept on the throne. But that is what led to him actually consolidating his rule. So when we talk of the contrast with Tipu, I think it becomes very important to understand Hyder's leadership skills, Hyder's, also his understanding of social dynamics. How do I treat a Hindu population whose kingdom I have usurped from a Hindu Maharaja, and what were the things he did vis-a-vis the complete opposite. If the graph, if you can graphically represent it, it's a upward exponential curve I see of Hyder's, rags to riches story. Tipu gets this kingdom on a platter. So it's a declining exponential decay curve for Tipu, where from that place of splendor, from the place of I can do no wrong, hubris takes over, arrogance takes over, and that eventually leads to his downfall right downwards till his death in 1799. So I think unless you see these two people in contrast, it would be very difficult to understand.
True that, and I think in the book also that's your unique writing style, that you look at the emotional journeys of all of these characters, drawing this, this whole conjecture of him turning into this sort of megalomaniac because of all the abuse that he faced as a child and more. So before we speak of the father-son dynamics, which is really interesting, let's talk about Tipu. And I didn't know until I read here that the title Sultan was given to him as a name as when he was born. It was isn't it? And later on he is conferred with other titles that he asked for, because there is a sense of insecurity both Heather and he had throughout.
Yeah, yes. I think that is very true. Both of them had this severe sense of inferiority complex. Haider initially, so because he was a commander of the army, the subtitle given was usually Nayak, Haider Nayak. And so people would Banni Nayakare, Killi Banni, they used to address him as Nayakare. So using his good offices with the Maharaja, he gets a proclamation passed that anyone who calls me Nayak, their tongue should be cut off. Now the poor guy, by the time today it can be broadcast on social media immediately, but there by the time the proclamation made its way everywhere, people didn't know. So one poor soldier who didn't know this rule had his tongue actually cut off. So the idea that I'm a usurper, I don't belong to that class, I think that was very rife in both their minds somewhere, the inferiority complex about that. And so Tipu also, actually that the judgment is varied there. Some historians say Tipu Sultan was his original name, but Tipu Saib is what he was initially called. And Sultan is a title he bestowed upon himself, because Haider never considered himself as the ruler. He always considered himself as a very devoted servant of the Maharaja. But Tipu realized that why should I put this puppet on the stage, on the throne, and I'd rather depose him. I become the supreme dictator. And I call the kingdom also Sarkare Khudadad, or the God-given kingdom. And so this obsession with titles, he sends delegations to the Mughal emperor saying, I am the original ruler of this land. So can you confer the legal jurisdiction for me to rule? Because though Haider had taken the kingdom as a contract from the Maharaja, that was not a hereditary position that passed on naturally, even legally speaking, to the son. So he wanted that sanction to rule from the Mughal emperor. The Mughal was himself hostage to the Marathas then, so he couldn't do much. So he sends a delegation all the way to the Ottoman Caliph, saying, I am the original ruler, I am a true blue-blooded Muslim ruler. These are the the medals I wear, how many destruction and killing and everything I've done. So confer on me the title of the Badshah of Mysore. And the Ottoman Caliph actually does that. He does send the permission to rule. Now this was something that was happening even before, like the Khiljis, the Lodhis, the Tughlaqs. They would get the legitimacy for their rule from the Caliph sitting there in Turkey. So, but here the Mughals were the ones who did not depend on that external sanction, but Tipu again goes back to that. And after that, he calls himself Badshah, Tipu Sultan, Bahadur, and has this huge octagonal throne that is commissioned, golden throne with a Huma bird on it and all of that. The sad part was he never got to sit on that throne. By the time he commissioned it and it got made, by then he was already dead. And that throne or the vestiges of it are still lying in the London Museum. And constantly we see in the book, Madhu, as you read, they try to have matrimonial alliances with the Nizam, and they all scoff at him, saying you are of low descent, you may be a Muslim, but you are not of our class. And so this quest for acceptance, for legitimacy, I think that becomes a rubric of both their lives.
And you offer a glimpse into their difficult relationship, the father and son. In fact, there is this really bizarre indemnity bond that Tipu writes to his father. It's quite self-flagellatory also. Do you mind reading it? Okay.
So while you look it up,
Yeah.
I will just give a context. So both the...
Also another question, which is connected, so I thought you can deal with that together, is that both of them had very different leadership styles. They were different individuals. So would you also speak a little bit about that?
So the father and son, so Tipu was a son who was born out of a lot of prayers by both Haider and his wife Fatima. They go to the Dargah of Tipu Mastan Aulia in Arcot, and that's how he's born and that's how the name comes. But as he grows up, even when Haider was illiterate all his life because of the troubled childhood that I spoke of, the only literary achievement that he had was to be able to sign the first alphabet of his name, which was Ha. So beyond that, he really didn't have any education, but he wanted his sons, Tipu and Karim, to actually get good education. So he puts them under some Maulvi there, and he doesn't know what is going on because he is not well read himself. But 2 years or 3 years later, he suddenly conducts a mock examination, and he's aghast by what he hears his son say, and he loses his temper badly. He brushes them both aside, and he says, if my son reads things like this, he's going to turn out to be a religious zealot and bigot when he grows big. He'll become a good mullah, but not a Raja of a kingdom. And all that I have achieved through my hard work, he is going to squander it all away. And that rubric, repeatedly we see him narrating that this guy is good for nothing and all of that, but he puts him under his tutelage of warfare, and that has great outcomes also. Tipu shows a lot of daring in the first and second Anglo-Mysore war, but I think somewhere he thought very less, the father thought very less of the son's intelligence, foresight, diplomacy, statecraft, and there were several other boys whom he actually favored against the son. There was one Muhammad Ali whom he adopted, so many adopted sons, and there was a Sheikh Ayaz whom he also adopts, and he says, I think this one will be a better successor to me. And so one of the first things that Tipu does after coming to power is to eliminate Sheikh Ayaz. So you see that the conflict between the two people, and in the battle of Chinkurli, this is near Melkote, this is called Moti Talab or Tennur Kere. So there, Tonnur Kere, there, when the Marathas attack in 1770, so Tipu says something and Haider loses his cool in the middle of the war. He takes a cane and backs him hard on his posterior and in front of everybody. And Tipu is so incensed by that, he dashes his sword and his turban and says, I'm not going to fight with you anymore. You and your war with the Marathas, good luck to you, and goes away. And much later, he actually dresses up as a beggar, escaping from the Maratha attack, and comes back to Srirangapatna. And maybe around that time, there was this Karar Nama, or an agreement that the father extracted of his son, which was found in his room in the palace after his fall by the British. Now that had 8 articles, which are very self-illuminating. He says, first one, I, as in Tipu, I will not do any one thing without the pleasure of your blessed majesty, that is Haider. If I do, let me be punished in whatever manner may seem fitting to your auspicious mind. If in the affairs of the Sarkar I should commit theft or be guilty of fraud, big or small, let me as due punishment therefore be strangled. If I be guilty of prevarication or misrepresentation or deceit, the punishment is the same strangulation. Without the orders of the presence, I will not receive from anyone nazars, neither will I take things from anyone. If I do, let my nose be cut off, and let me be driven out from the capital city. If accepting on the affairs of the Sarkar, I should hold conversation, probably cabal and intrigues, with any person or be guilty of deceit, let me in punishment be stretched on a cross. Whenever a country shall be committed to my charge by the Sarkar, I will carry on all business with the advice of the Sarkar. And if I transact such affairs without this channel, let me be strangled. If therefore, if I have written everything in my own free will, Hosho Havas mein maine ye likha hai, and I will act in each article accordingly. If I forget this and I go back on any such article, let me be punished agreeably to the foregoing writing. So, there are a few psychologists here. I think father wounds in a person, getting this kind of corporal punishment so early in life, I think that also makes a person what he or she becomes later. And Haider had stopped cow and bull slaughter in Mysore. Now, even as a boy, this fellow would go on a hunting spree and kill those same animals, for which Haider would get so angry that he put him in solitary confinement for 6 or 7 days, where not a single person should talk to him. Even the food has to go from almost like a jail thing, from under the door, give him some food, let him learn how to be. So I think there's a very strange dynamic, but at the same time he was so fond of his son, he wanted him to excel, and the son did show a lot of promise, as I said, in the first and second Anglo-Mysore war, where he fought shoulder to shoulder with his father and helped in scripting a very good, unprecedented victory for Mysore.
True that, but the first and second Anglo-Mysore wars, as one reads, are spearheaded by, thank you. The first and second Anglo-Mysore wars are spearheaded by Hyder, but the third and fourth, Mysore actually loses under Tipu's leadership to the British, and given all the atrocities, like recently it was Diwali, and you know, most of us know about this, the Narga Chaturdashi day, all the Mandya Mayangars, I think that is sort of like a genetic memory being butchered. But you read of similar genocides even by Hyder, especially in Kerala and then later Coorg, and with Tipu also again going back to Kerala to seek revenge, and also the Christians of Mangalore and more. Could you, I think maybe we should just say that, please, if this was on Instagram, follow some, I don't know, should we censor it or not? But it is difficult to hear, but I think it has to be said.
Yeah, I'll try to limit the gore, but even Hyder, I think in Mysore he was a different person, as I said. He tried to maintain that harmony. There's a very interesting episode where, there's a Peerzada of a seminary in Srirangapatna, a very famous man, and there's a procession of the Ranganatha Swami temple going past the temple, and like it happens now, a lot of people from inside came and started pelting stones at the Rath, and so the procession had to stop. But the next day the Hindus, they armed themselves and came back and managed to bulldoze their way through the procession. And the Peerzada is very unhappy, and so he goes to Hyder and complains, saying, how could they do this? Now he listens to the whole episode and says, who cast the first stone? He said, we did this. So he said, then you should be ready to get the return from them. He said, but we can't have idolatry in a Muslim kingdom. He said, who told you this is a Muslim kingdom? I am but a slave of the Maharaja. So this guy is very angry, the Peerzada. He says, I will go away from this kingdom if you do like this. He said, you can be my guest, you go wherever you want. And the fellow leaves Mysore, he settles down in Madras, he's unhappy, he tries to come back, and Hyder actually prevents him from coming. So while there was that kind of real politics also playing within Mysore, outside Mysore in his conquest, in Coorg, in Malabar, we have those gory details where 5 rupees for the head of every Nair, or 5 rupees for the head of every Kodava who came. And there is mention that how he ghoulishly kept counting heads as they kept coming in procession and distributing money, 5 rupees to everybody. And in Coorg, in fact, he says, Wilkes mentions that when a very handsome, pretty young boy's face, the Coorgis are so good looking and fair, this face, the head that came was of a very pretty boy. And so he says, oh, he's so pretty, so let's stop.
This was a 600th head by then.
Yes, 600 head by then. So if that boy was not pretty, then I think several more heads would have come rolling. So this kind of torture even he did, but I think Tipu took it to another extreme level. They're both within and outside. They were wanton cruelty that was done. As you mentioned, on the day of Narak Chaturdashi, which just happened, 700 members of the Mandya Mayengar family were ruthlessly killed on that day. And to this day, after so many years, that community does not celebrate Diwali when all of us celebrated it last week. So that memory, the intergenerational trauma still remains for them. And this happened in Mysore, in Coorg again, complete wipeout. On 12th of December every year, the Coorgis commemorate a Martyrs' Day, where at Revathi Raju, this hill, he calls all of them, for a reconciliation, and they come unsuspectingly, and they are unarmed. And while the whole lot comes unarmed, literally stabbed in the back, and there is this, rivers of blood that flow out, and Pattole Padame, which is the Kodava oral literature, has eulogies. So much written about this horrific incident, and that Martyrs' Day is commemorated even to this day. So when we talk of something of the past, this trauma memory remains with those communities today. The Canara Christians of Mangalore. 27 churches in Mangalore being completely demolished, including the Milagres Church, which was later re-established. And why did these things happen? I mean, the Mandya Mayangars also, they were just two members of that community, Thirumal Rao and Narayan Rao, who were interceding on behalf of the deposed Wadiyar family, the Maharani Lakshmi Ammani, to carry messages to Madras to negotiate with the British. Now, every time he sets people against Thirumal Rao and Narayan Rao, they are very, smart cookies. They somehow manage to escape and run away. Now, since I could not capture you, I will meet that punishment on your entire community. That, that mindset. And on a day which is very, very sacred for you, Deepavali, Narak Chaturdashi. Similarly with the Christians. Now, his grouse was when the Second Anglo-Mysore War happened, a lot of the bishops and so on, the Portuguese bishops who were there, they collaborated with the British. They were giving them money and provisions and all of that. But the minute they realized that Tipu is going to attack, all the bishops, they were the high and mighty in the clergy, they took their ships and boats and went away to Goa. The axe fell on the poor common Christians of Canada, who were labourers, farmers, all of these people. And upwards of 40,000, 50,000 people ruthlessly being dragged all the way from Mangalore all the way to Srirangapatna. Pregnant women with kids. I mean, the gory details, you should just see, like people were delivering on the way, people were dying on the way. There was no provision to even conduct a funeral of the person. The dead bodies were left to be eaten by dogs and jackals. And even now the Archdiocese and the Mangalore, Christians, this pain and hurt is very much rife in their minds. And so, when we talk of history, it's not something that is way back in the past. Similarly, the Nayars of Malabar, the northern Kerala, they bore the brunt of the Mysore attacks, both father and son. As I said, constant, attacks, murders, genocide. The eyewitness accounts that I have quoted, it really, bothers you so much. Mangled limbs found almost for kilometers and kilometers. So in the wake of all of that, it is very, very difficult to write, to read these excesses, but I think it is important to put them on record in one place.
And so one wonders then, how does he get the title of Sher-e-Mysore? What is it? What changed the narrative? And why was Tipu suddenly eulogized? And we remember him, of course, through our Amar Chitra Kathas and Sanjay Khan, who also I think Karnataka remembers him also because he burned down Premier Studios, right? So
I think, particularly in post-independent India, anybody who fought the British is a warrior. Yeah? And but we ascribe the status of a freedom fighter to that person, and the same happens here too. But we must keep in mind that Tipu was taking the help of the French, who were no less colonial than the British. They were very much part of the Carnatic wars of the Deccan. It took us more time to redeem Pondicherry than the rest of India. So if not the British, we all would have been speaking French in Karnataka instead of Kannada. So that thing, very much, you're just using various players of the time to safeguard your life, your honor, your kingdom. That is really not some freedom fighter for India and to liberate India and all of that. That's really stretching the truth a bit too far. And also we see, so with the French, and he was being a politician, with the French he was playing to the rivalry that the French had to the British, right from Europe to here. The rivalries of Europe were playing out in Indian soil and Indian politics. So that is one part. But to the entire Ummah, the Muslim Brotherhood, he was appealing to the religious sentiments there when he sends this emissary right from the second year of his coming to the throne, coming to power. He was sending emissaries to the Middle East, whether it was the Ottoman Caliph or the Shah of Persia. And just 2 years before his death, he also sends a letter to Zaman Shah, the Durrani chief of Afghanistan. And it is very, very clear. There is no ambiguity here. It's his letter in his own words that you come and invade India, and in 2 years let this war against the Kafirs happen. And the first year let us liberate the whole of northern India from the Kafir influence, which was, and also depose the Mughal. And he had a lot of hatred for the Mughal because he did not give him the title first. And secondly, he was under the captivity of Mahajji Scindia and said, he's not a true ruler because he's captured by a Kafir. So let's cleanse this part of the, these people. And the second year, we will liberate the whole of South India. Then let's both meet in Central India and divide this whole landmass among us and declare it as an Islamic Sultanate. So Caliphate, that is exactly what he himself writes to Zaman Shah, and Zaman Shah actually agrees. Now the British intercept that, and that is how the last Anglo-Mysore war happens, where they say this guy is really getting too big for his boots, let's cut him to size. So this whole building him to a larger than life image is largely because of this anti-British narrative. But there too, I would not, for one, not concede that he was a brave soldier, that he fought till the very last breath of his life. But that bravery and that anti-British attitude, at what cost? At what cost, and at what kind of the trauma to so many thousands and thousands of people? Someone could argue that kingship is inherently linked with violence. Now, all the kings of the past, even in the Wadiyar time, noses and ears would be cut off, and these kinds of tortures. It was a medieval time, you can't set modern standards. But I think here it becomes more excessive, because along with the times that were there, you also have a religious element added to it. That you specifically target only those who do not subscribe to your faith. And that's what the Hindus and Christians of Karnataka had to face. And that is the truth, no one can brush aside.
True that. And the book also has, this theatre of the absurd. You have Nizam Ali and Madhav Rao, and so there's a lot of treachery, there are traitors, loyalties being just brushed aside. But also this book brings to life some very interesting women characters. And from the Mysore royalty, as well as Tipu's mother herself, Akunisa. And I think there's one interesting anecdote about how scared Haider is of his wife, and so is Tipu of his mother. And please do speak about the other Lakshmi Amani and all these amazing women.
So Haider, who was a terror to the British, was of course very scared of his wife. So, so he used to apparently go to her apartments, and he would be so pet. She would start tongue lashing him, shouting at him. She was very, very literal shrew. So he would then quickly run away from her chambers, and he had his male friends who would sit and drunken revelry and lewd jokes. So he was anything that a devoted Muslim was not, given to intoxication, alcohol. He would come out and say, it is so much easier to face the British sword than my wife's tongue. And this mother seems to have been a very, very, commanding figure. And she decided even which girl Tipu had to marry, because Haider had some choice in mind. Now she comes up with another choice and forces Tipu to marry him. He ends up marrying both, by the way. But the mother's stranglehold on the son, it seems to have been quite evident. But that interesting episode that you mentioned, so people normally talk about Diwan Purnaya, who was a very close confidant of Haider. In fact, when Haider dies in the battle, Second Anglo-Mysore War at Narsingh Raipet, it is Purnaya who somehow manages to keep that entire news secret. Haider's body is secretively brought back to Srirangapatna so that the kingdom doesn't, face problems. For someone like that, who was your father's close confidant, in the middle of a court proceeding, he's supposed to have told him, you're such an intelligent man, why don't you join us and convert to Islam? Well, Purnaya was a very, very, wise Madhva Brahmin, so he immediately, Haji Huzur, he says, and quickly makes an exit. And his mother, who's sitting in the parda behind, she's supposed to have come out and said, have you lost your mind? Your father never did such things. If you actually do such, unthinkable thoughts, all your, confidants will desert you and you will be left alone. So please mind what you do. But obviously that advice fell on deaf ears. He never listened to his mother. Of course, there are so many women. The Mysore royalty you mentioned. There is a Deva Jammani who's constantly conspiring there. She overthrows her own adopted son. There's drama of the absurd. So the Wadiyars, to some extent, to a large extent, I think they were to blame themselves for the misery that befell them. Powerless rulers who gave all the power to their Dalabais, or the commanders-in-chief, Devrajaya and Nanjarajaya, who were the actual wheelers and dealers. They would, again, the politician is not here, so I think all our modern politicians would be put to shame by the kind of corruption, the kind of caprice. This Nanjarajaya was actually the Maharaja's father-in-law. And despite that, he wants to go in the open court, he goes to kill his own son-in-law, who's the king, and Bollywood drama, the daughter, the wife comes middle and she says, "Mere last pe guzar ke, you can go and kill my husband." So all this drama is happening, in the court, and so it was but a matter of time that someone who was so astute and sensible like Hyder usurps that and uses it to his advantage. So they had themselves to blame. But particularly, I'm very fascinated by this Rajalakshmi Ammani, a young girl who had married Immadi Krishnaraj Wadaya. She's widowed at the age of 24. She has no children of her own. Hyder is putting, the kings on the throne. So there's how do you select a Maharaja, new Maharaja? All the royalty, nobility, young boys are brought to a room and lots of objects are placed there. So whoever, he's going to look at that and then decide who the king is. So one little boy goes and picks a sword and a mirror. And so he says, I think this guy is good because he can keep an equanimity between art, culture and also of warfare. So let's make him the king. And this poor lady had to agree to all of that. If her choice was there, she could not go with it. And Tipu particularly puts her in captivity. She's literally under house arrest, nothing can happen. But despite all of that, this woman sitting in the confines of home, she was managing to send through those Mysore Pradhans, Tirumal Rao and Narayan Rao, emissaries to the British, Lord Piggott, Macartney, Meadows, Cornwallis, everybody saying, restore the kingdom to us and we will support you in the war against Tipu Sultan. So in fact, there was a Venkatramana temple there, Kille Venkatramana. So every day her only liberty she would have was to go and offer puja there. And so she apparently, in the puja ki thali, she would hide these letters and take them there, and with a sleight of hand and a wink there to the pujari, the puja saman would be taken, with that the letter, and that letter would then go all the way to Madras. And needed quite a lot of grit to actually be able to do that, and she eventually succeeded. And when vaccination first comes to Mysore, after Tipu's death, Lakshmi Ammani takes the lead and actually takes the vaccine. And there is that famous painting of her and the daughters-in-law posing that we've taken the vaccine and it is safe to do. And now also people have so much hesitation about vaccine post-COVID. So in 1801, for a lady to do that, I think it spoke a lot about her character.
Thank you, Vikram. And Vikram, I've known you now for a decade and a half. I think we both met, we both got our Yuva Puraskars at the same time from the Government of India.
When we were Yuva.
When we were Yuva. 2011. So, and of course, then there was Gohar. And so, I have, let's take a little deviation from this duo now and talk about you, Vikram, because, please, I'm sure we're all curious. So, it's such a solitary journey being an artist, being a historian, a writer. And you, in your early teens, instead of doing what people in our generation probably did, played video games or went to parties, were always looking for dusty records, in libraries and in the palace. And I know that you personally would go to the second-hand markets looking for vinyls and, tell us a little bit about that. And also imagine after all that and this, very difficult unpacking of history that you have done in all your books, and then you're having your effigy burned. How does Vikram Sampath, what kind of filters do you create? Do you go home every night and have a saltwater bath or, burn some incense? What do you do, Vikram,
I wish I knew the answer to that, Madhu, but as to what motivates you despite all the odds, I think, as I've written what he read out, that the only protective shield for a historian is his adherence to truth. And in this book and all the other books too, whatever people may dub you as, whatever other allegations and everything that go. Before, as an artist myself too, I used to be very sensitive about this. I would take it very personally that someone who doesn't even know me, why are they taking it out even on social media? You're on the paycheck of this, payroll of somebody. Show me the money, honey, where is it coming from? So that was how I was earlier, but I think over time life teaches you to toughen up. And now, I think once you find a goal, a vision, that this is what I think destiny has chosen, for whatever reason, you for, all this surround sound, the surround noise doesn't seem to affect too much. And as I said, I don't know how my parents really took it. I constantly keep putting them to so much of trouble, for them to actually digest all this, nobody would want to see their son, facing these kind of troubles, and if it's an only son, all the worse. So then, they all become, it's collateral damage for them too, as much as it is for me. So, but I hope at the end of it all, it is worth all this effort. And yeah, as was mentioned earlier, initially it was a solitary, work, but now from the last 1 year, it has become a larger vision. And biggest thanks I owe to the person sitting here, Bhavish Agarwal, who's, every meeting with him, I think he comes up with some gazillion ideas, and he says, I just give you the idea, but getting that idea is the most important thing. Most of us won't have that space for that. So generally we met at Araku Coffee, and then I told him about this, that I need to institutionalize this scholarship, that it shouldn't be limited. I'm limited by my capacity, and especially after the COVID attack, where I almost came to the brink of losing my life, I think I'm deeply cognizant of my own mortality, that there is a limit to what you can do, and any day you can just be taken away. And so how much can you do in your lifespan? Should it be much more? Should it be broad-based? Should you actually make this subject more interesting? It is not a subject where, as I was kneeling down outside class, it is not a subject as boring as that. As you grow up, you realize that history is the mirror in which you can identify yourself as a nation, as a people, as a civilization. So we were discussing that, and he said, you form this foundation and I'll help you with it. And that's how this Foundation for Indian Historical and Cultural Research came about, where we want to actually foster new scholarships. So we've started this Jadunath Sarkar Fellowship, where this year we've selected 8 fellows, and they're given a substantial stipend of 15 lakhs each. And the ask is at the end of the year, they need to write a book, a manuscript. So every year, 10 books, new books are getting added. We are doing projects with universities, including Nalanda and others, on important topics of history. And we have a Yuva program, which actually takes history to the young children. How to make Indian history interesting, exciting, inspiring, in the language that they understand. Instagram Reels or whatever else that they follow. The content should be well researched, but the language should be contemporary, very modern and young, and that is what this initiative has been. So the solitariness is there, but I think there is some vision, and when that vision and goal, you are just looking only at that, like Arjun looking at the eye of the fish, then all this surround sound, सब कुछ तो लोग कहेंगे, लोगों का काम है कहना. That's all.
I think that's a perfect moment to open it out to some questions. I'll let you pick. Vikram. Gentleman there.
Which I read in recent news articles. Just I want to bring, it's relevant, I feel. Whatever the news article, the downfall of Mr. Vijay Mallya happened after he purchased Tipu's world in auction. That was I thought. That's what I wanted to bring. Thank you, and I compliment you for me. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, there is this superstition that Tipu brings bad luck to people. So I've done all my puja part to ensure that doesn't.
Hi sir, here. Namaste. So entire journey of here in Tipu Sultan and Hyder Ali. I haven't completely read the book, but I have started it. So I am from Chitradurga, so wherein there is a clear and important episode of Hyder Ali conquering that place. So can you shed some light on that? I haven't came across that.
Yeah. So there's of course Madhukari Naika, the Palegar of Chitradurga, who was initially a vassal of Hyder, but when the Marathas invade Mysore, he tries to switch sides. So when the Marathas go back, Hyder obviously wants to take revenge. And it's a long story which I capture there. In brief, I try to. So Chitradurga Fort is is an impregnable fortress, the Yedusuttina Kote that it is. So for him to conquer that was very difficult, and he tries all kinds of subterfuge, tries to create fissures in the family of the Chitradurga Nayaka, his own father-in-law in fact, and there's this story of a Bhadrakali temple which was there on the top of the fortress where every night they would actually have human sacrifice and so on. During that time, one of the people passed on the secrets of a secret passage that was there. It was a kindi, or a very small passage where only one at a time a person could crawl their way up and go to the fort. And I'm sure those who are Kannadigas here would know the Jayanti song of Onake Obaba, so from the Kannada film, Nagar Havu. So all these people wriggle their way through that kindi and try to come out. And there's this watchman's wife who manages to hear some sound and this thing there, and she's Obaba. At that time, her husband has just started his lunch, so she doesn't want to disturb him. And she goes near that Bhadrakali temple, and actually there's a pistol, the Monake to masala kutne wala jo, that one. So she brings that from her home, and one by one, when these people are coming out, she whacks them on their head, pulls them out, and kills them. Several, 50, 60 people like that are killed. Then suddenly the watchman finishes his lunch and comes, and he sees his wife as the little Bhadrakali standing there, but despite that, actually all her sacrifice goes in vain, and someone stabs her in the back and she's killed, and Chitradurga also falls to Hyder after that. But the heroism of Onake Obaba, and this is not a made-up story, it actually makes its first appearance in the Mysore archaeological report, I think 1914 or 16 or so on. So there is evidence also that there was some lady like this, though, a logical question is, if someone is being hit so bad on the head that he dies, how come the person below didn't hear this noise or the blood, and why after that so many people kept going? That's also something one needs to figure out. Even now when you go to Chitradurga fort, you have that Obaba Kindi, where that small little hole through which she came and actually killed. So among the women of Mysore, I think Obaba is also someone who stands out, and thanks for that question.
Hello. Vikram, actually your book, the theatre of the activity of your book is the whole of peninsular India. So it involves not only the Mysore state but Marathas, the Arcot, Nizam, and the Nayars of Kerala, as well as the Portuguese, the British and the French. So it's not just vertical biography. So I'm curious to know about the extent of scholarship. If you can just give us an overview of the kind of research, if it's possible in an answer, because it's not just Tipu and Hyder, it's actually the history of the whole of peninsular India.
True, and Alo, who's a dear friend who actually was tortured with reading all the advanced copies of this manuscript and giving
I insist it was not torture.
giving her feedback. So yes, it's not just of Mysore or of Hyder or Tipu. You have the Nizam, you have the Arcot Nawab, you have the Marathas, you have the Mughal Empire in decline, and the European powers, the Dutch, the Portuguese, the British and the French. So the diversity of sources was immense. I had to actually make several trips to London, to Paris to get those original records, including the dreams of Tipu Sultan. We have this very famous play also by Girish Karnad, the Dreams of Tipu Sultan, where a very rosy picture is actually painted of the man, but the actual dreams. So Tipu supposedly he was a very vivid dreamer. So, and every night he would have these dreams, and in the morning he would spend about 2 hours in his toilet, sitting on his cot and probably writing all the dreams that he saw the previous night. And I actually managed to, my froze when I saw the original, his handwritten dreams, which are still kept in the India Office Library in London. And this, when I got them translated, I tried my hand at learning Persian to be able to, decode this. That ended in a disaster. So I thought it's better to use a translator. The dreams are full of, he's obsessed with what? He's obsessed with, establishing himself. And so several of these dreams are, where Prophet Muhammad or some angel comes down and tells him go there and kill this one and break this. So in fact I had those dreams also psychoanalyzed, because they say dreams are the greatest index of your subconscious mind, what you're constantly thinking. So probably there was not a single day when this man's life was not one of war. So sources like that, which again, you fictionalize it, make it a heroic play, that's one thing. But along with that, the actual source is something totally different. So I've extracted several of those translated versions of those dreams, Persian records, the Maratha Peshwa Daftar. The Marathas maintained, immaculate records in Marathi. Every letter that went between Pune and Mysore, or the other Hyderabad and Madras, all of that has been documented in the Peshwa Daftar. Very few people have actually used that because they're all in Marathi. Luckily, since I can have a working knowledge of the language, a lot of that was something that I could manage to do. Kannada records, French records from Paris. So it was literally looking at the same subject from multiple lenses, which is how a historian needs to look at. There's that famous story, right? A poem which we read about the blind men and the elephant. Where there's literally the elephant in the room here is history. So all the blind men were asked to touch the elephant and say, how does it look? And someone said it looked like the trunk, someone said it looked like the tusk, someone said it's thin like the tail, broad like the body of the elephant. They were all correct, but they were all also wrong because the elephant is the sum of the parts. So when you're looking at history too, we're all blind men looking at the past, which is not here to analyze for us. So you have to develop this triangulation of facts to come to a holistic view of what that elephant in the room actually looks like. Thank you.
This is the last question we can take. We're so sorry. I think we will have to probably email Vikram or read the book for all the answers. Yeah. And because even as we haven't been able to discuss the aftermath of what happens to Srirangapatnam because there's no time. So one last question, please.
Yeah, hello, Vikram Sampath. So my question is diversity a boon or a bane? Because it helped a lot of other invasions of invaders to get a control over a lot of huge parts of India. So is diversity a boon or a bane?
How would that be related to them invading? I mean, India has always been invaded by several people, right from very olden
we have a lot of difference of opinions, like we fight against ourselves. So it was easier for them to get a huge comfort. So
true. That way, of course, I think that's why the 18th century, which is an important where this book is located, it becomes a very important lesson for all of us today because that was the time when India capitulated to finally do the British colonial subjugation. In those 100 years after the death of Aurangzeb, when there was no central power, the Marathas also after the death of Chhatrapati Shivaji Maharaj, what happened to Sambhaji, and till the Peshwa power gained ground, there was no centrifugal force in India. So there were numerous riyasats, Awadh, Hyderabad, Arcot, so many Bengal, and all of them jostling with each other. As Madhu also mentioned, the wars of succession, the Carnatic wars that happened were all the wars of succession. Nazir Jung, Muzaffar Jung fighting for the Hyderabad throne after Asaf Jah's death. In Arcot you had Chanda Sahib and Muhammad Ali fighting with each other. And in all of this they thought the British, the French were just yet another player. We can use one against the other to vanquish them. Not realizing that this was a new enemy you were dealing with, where they used you to your advantage to such an extent that they could overthrow everyone and establish their supremacy. So I think the 18th century that way strategically also holds a lot of lessons for us today. And I'm so delighted and honored to see Mr. Vikram Sood here. Thank you, sir, for your time.
Shubhi, one moment. I think Vikram wanted me to read the last passage about how Tipu passes. And before that, I'd like him, and we'll end with that, and we'll ask Vikram to also talk about, he had such a awful social report card. But if there were some redeeming features, what would they be?
Go on for a while, but so I mean, yes, it's not. There were a lot of blacks, but there were some whites too. Someone, as I said, an emasculated Mysore army to making it a fighting fit army, reorganizing the army, ensuring that there's a navy which is quite strong. and creating a market for Mysorean products abroad. So while he sent all these emissaries, so a lot of Mysore products which are GI coded now, Mysore jasmine, Mysore sandalwood, aracanut, betel leaf, silk, sericulture, so all of this, and so there were stores for this which happened in Jeddah, in Oman, in Basra, all these Middle Eastern places, even Paris, Mysorean products and ivory and all of this going there. Then he understood, I think geopolitics he understood pretty well, where, when they were signing, as he asked the previous question, when these players were negotiating with the French in Pondicherry or the British in Madras, they would sign a treaty with the Indian power, but when it came to acting on it, that agreement was not even worth the paper it was written on, because they would say, finally the ratification has to come from our emperor in Paris or in London or Batavia for the Dutch. So this guy said, why do I deal with these local players? I'll directly go and talk to the main emperor. So that's why these emissaries went to Louis XVI's court in France while he was in the thick of the French Revolution, and to the Malartic, the Isle of France, in Mauritius, and also to all these Middle Eastern nations. So that was one thing where he understood what, strategically how do you deal with these Western powers. So, and then he also increased the cultivable land of Mysore, non-interest-free loans that were given for farmers to increase the produce. With of course, the ulterior motive was to get more money, which he could pay as war indemnity to the British. Now, when he lost the Third Anglo-Mysore War, 3.5 crores was the war indemnity. That time the state budget was about 2 crores. Today you won't even get a 2 BHK in Bangalore for that cost. So, not even in Devanhalli, his birthplace. So 3.5 crores to raise that, he had to give away his sons, Abdul Khalik and Mahizuddin, as hostages to the British. And so to increase revenues, of course, oppressive taxation began, and also confiscating the land grants to temples and so on. But also to that way increase cultivation so that the state coffers are, so it had a unintended side effect also for the farmers of the state. So those were some of the redeeming features. To conclude, while you plan to read that little paragraph, which is really poignant, it's almost like a Greek tragedy, his life, where from this heights of power that he's been given on a silver, platter, it's a steady downfall, making mistakes after mistakes, to the extent that towards the end, everybody kept him in the dark. The impregnable fort of Srirangapatna gets breached, but he's surrounded himself by so many sycophants that who don't even tell him that this breach is there, and he doesn't use his leadership skills or thought to go and investigate it himself. Someone shows a few stones that are scattered here, and he says, oh, there's no breach, Sultan, and he believes them and goes away. And all through he's caught in incantations, astrological consultations. He was supposedly very good in astrology himself, which he picked up. And on that day, the fateful day of 4th May 1799, when he was finally killed, he was checking his own horoscope with the astrologers, and there was the movement of Mars going through an axis, which I think Narhariji will be able to better explain. I have no knowledge of astrology. Till the time that particular movement of Mars was there, the fort could hold on to. But that moment had passed, and he tries several things. Many people say just escape from the fort. And he makes preparations for that. There is evidence that he had connected his valuables, his harem, which had some 600 women. So all of them, some of them at least, his favorite ones maybe, and some elephants and camels. So he wanted to escape. There was only one water gate that was a secret passage. But there was so much treachery even within the kingdom, within his own fortress. It permeated every brick and wall of Srirangapatna, I guess. And Mir Sadiq, who was his very trusted prime minister, he and Mir Nadim, who is the Kiledar, they get that door closed. And this guy is going there and says, open that, and Mir Nadim looks the other way. And at that time, in that pitiable condition, he is not even able to command him. And all the soldiers are taken away to some other place on the pretext of giving salaries. So when the British entered, there was not a single person to even defend the fort. And this man, in make-believe, he's sitting there, and there's a huge oil pot, iron in an iron pot in which oil is put. And he's asked to look into that, your reflection into that. nazar utar jata hai or whatever, and then he is doing all this, doing pujas, and then he realizes that the British have just entered, they are within striking distance, and he tries to escape, there is no route. Then of course he takes his sword and says, let me try my best, maybe seeing the Sultan himself in battlefield may invigorate the soldiers and they may fight, but they are all locked up somewhere else. So this guy goes there, and the British have already entered by then. They don't even know that the Sultan of Mysore is the one on the field there, and he's not even having his turban that falls off, so he's just like any ordinary soldier, but he's wearing a very bejeweled sword belt, and looking at that, one of the English soldiers want to get that out of him, and they strike at him, and that's how he dies, and his body is then lying, the last moments of his life pretty poignantly captured there, where he's seeing his whole kingdom ablaze. It's as I said, a Shakespearean tragedy where a huge bomb goes off, bodies are all mangled, masses moving, and he's sitting there with, I think, his foot also terribly injured, looking at all of this, and then someone comes and shoots him in the temple, and that's how he dies. And by evening, the fortress of Srirangapatna has become a veritable fort of hell. Decaying bodies, vultures everywhere. The British also don't know where this man has gone. His own family doesn't know where he's gone. The British think he is hiding in the Zenana. And so then a search party goes through the ramparts of hell that Srirangapatna had become. And there, amidst a heap of dead bodies, you have this man. One of his physicians, Raja Khan, he identifies. This man's eyes are open. His body is warm, and Major Allen, who was an eyewitness that time, part of that search party, he says his eyes were open, his hand clasped the sword still, and we were quite scared whether he was really alive, and he'll spring up and hit us. Once we examined the pulse, we realized that he's done, and a quiet hurrah was raised, and his body was taken back for a funeral at Srirangapatna. His children then get deposed, they're all sent away to Vellore, where they try to instigate a rebellion, and then they are packed off to Calcutta, which is where I think descendants of his family in abject poverty, some of them still live. A lot of people say it's poetic justice, that's where they came from, and that's where they returned back to. In the middle, you have these 40 years, Interregnum, which becomes such an important period for me.
I think we'll end with that, because I'd like to leave you with that optic that Vikram has created, and you yourselves can read that paragraph, because we are short of time. Vikram, I know Tejasvi ji has been thanking one generation for writing this book. I think on behalf of all, intergenerationally, we thank you for your books, and thank you to the Foundation and Prabha Khaitan Foundation and FIHCR for creating this space. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, Madhu Nataraj and Dr. Vikram Sampath. Please give them a big round of applause. Now may I please request Ms. Revathi Raju to kindly deliver the vote of thanks. Ms. Revathi Raju, Ehsaas Woman of Bengaluru.
Sincere gratitude to Dr. Vikram Sampath for sharing his pertinent and inspiring thoughts with us. A special thank you to Ms. Madhu Nataraj for her thoughtful moderation of the session. It was truly a pleasure listening to both of you. A warmest thanks to Shri Tejasvi Surya, who is not here, he's already left the place. I also thank all of you for joining us in being a part of the significant milestone of Prabha Khaitan Foundation in association with the Federation of Indian Historical and Cultural Research. The Kitaab events in Bangalore would not have been possible without your participation and support. Shubhi Mehta. Friends, on your way out, you can purchase Vikram Sampath's book at a discounted rate from the book counter and get it personally autographed by me. Thank you.